What would happen in One Piece if Luffy ate another devil fruit? How would the story develop? How would Luffy's abilities change? And how will Luffy trigger the awakenings of this new fruits? In this video, Luffy eats 5 different devil fruits and then he experiences 5 different adventures in One Piece. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more of these kinds of videos. And now let's begin with Luffy and the 𝚬𝚙𝚎 fruit. Luffy's devil fruit is one of the most important aspects of the story. His devil fruit has allowed him to defeat some of the strongest characters in this universe. In the Wano arc we get a big twist. Luffy's devil fruit is not a random fruit that turns you into rubber, the fruit has the ability to warp reality. Since the end of the Wano arc, Luffy has been able to use almost the full potential of his devil fruit. But what would happen if Luffy ate a different devil fruit instead of the Gomu Gomu no Mi? How would the One Piece story have developed if Luffy had eaten Kaido's dragon fruit instead of the Gum Gum fruit? Let's start the story in Luffy's childhood. It's the first chapter of One Piece all over again, only with a small but very important difference. In Makino's party spa, Luffy doesn't snack on the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but on the fish fruit mythical model 𝚬𝚙𝚎. In this timeline, Shanks did not steal the Gum Gum fruit from a world government ship, but instead stole the dragon fruit from Big Mom. Do you remember the scene on the roof of Onigashima before Rooftop Peace? There Big Mom talks to Kaido about his fruit. Apparently, after the fall of rocks, Big Mom gave Kaido his devil fruit. But in this timeline, Big Mom just got off the wrong foot and didn't give Kaido his devil fruit. Instead, she kept the fruit to either sell it or to exchange it for an important item, such as one of the road poneglyphs. Shanks found out about it and simply stole the fruit from her. Shanks is known for maintaining the balance in the world of One Piece. Such a powerful devil fruit simply cannot remain with Big Mom. With a dragon fruit in his bag, Shanks then traveled to Fuchsia village to kill some time. And then everything happens like in the original timeline. Higuma starts a conflict with Shanks and Luffy eats a devil fruit. In the original timeline, Shanks pulls on Luffy's arm and we see Luffy's rubber abilities in action for the first time. In this timeline, Shanks also pulls on his arm, but instead of stretching, blue scales form on Luffy's skin. Luffy transforms into his dragon form for the first time, similar to Momonosuke on Punk Hazard. Luffy is just as shocked as Momonosuke and wants to transform back, but he doesn't know how. The Red Eye pirates are of course completely overwhelmed as well, but in the end they all laugh together and in that moment of calm, Luffy manages to return to his human form. The next scenes in this timelines are actually quite similar to the original timeline. Luffy is kidnapped by Higuma, Shanks saves him and loses his arm and leaves Luffy a straw hat, which originally belonged to Roger. In this timeline, Luffy also wants to become the king of the pirates. Then we switch to his childhood with Ace and Zabo. During this time, Luffy learns to master his devil fruit, similar to the Gum Gum fruit. Luffy learns to control his transformations, he also learns about his hybrid form. In the original timeline, Luffy lost to Sabo and Ace in their daily fights, but with the help of his new abilities he manages to win against them. This is of course because Zoan devil fruits give their user increased physical abilities. In this timeline, Luffy is of course physically superior to his brothers. He also learns to control his various elemental breaths. Luffy learns the Boro Breath, aka Flamethrower, the Electro Breath, aka Thunderbolt from his mouth, and the Whirlwinds and Wind Cutters. But the rest of his childhood remains quite similar. 10 years pass and Luffy finally begins his journey to become the king of the pirates. But this time the plot develops slightly differently than expected, because Luffy doesn't need a bow to sail in the East Blue. As a dragon he can simply fly around from island to island. Luffy's adventure in the East Blue will be like a speedrun. Even in the original timeline, Alvida, Captain Morgan, Captain Black, Don Creek and even Arlong couldn't do much to Luffy. Arlong was only a danger to Luffy because he had a home advantage with the swimming pool and because Luffy was still the biggest idiot in the East Blue saga. He just randomly slammed his feet into the cement of the Arlong Park. This would not work in this timeline because Luffy is no longer made of rubber. Instead, he would simply destroy the cement. Dragon Luffy would simply make short work of Arlong. Because as we know from Pokemon, water attacks are not very effective against dragon types. The only one who could really give Luffy problems in the East Blue would be Smoker. This marine captain has a Logia devil fruit. With his smoke fruit he can not only produce smoke, but also turn himself into smoke. Without Haki, Luffy wouldn't be able to touch Smoker at this point in the story. Luffy learns Haki in the second half of the story from Rayleigh. Smoker could therefore simply hold onto Dragon Luffy to stop him from traveling to the Grand Line. Similar to the original timeline, Dragon could help his son here. Or Luffy could escape from Smoker with his new dragon abilities. After all, he can fly in this form and he can also create whirlwinds. Theoretically, Luffy could create a whirlwind in Loguetown that frees him from Smoker's grip. It was raining heavily in Loguetown that day. That's a perfect condition for a massive whirlwind. Maybe Dragon even supported Luffy from afar and turned his whirlwind into a small hurricane. So there are several possibilities for Luffy to escape, similar to the original timeline. Arriving in the Grand Line, the Destroyed crew could continue their speedrun. The bounty hunters on Whiskey Peak are defeated, Mr. 5, Miss Valentine and Galdino are burnt on Little Garden. Galdino's wax would have no chance against Dragon Luffy's Boro Breath. The wax figure cabinet would never have happened. The Drum Island arc would also be over much faster. Luffy would simply fly Nami up to the castle, but Sanji could still come along to be emotional support for Nami. The real danger then arises through the next two major Logia antagonists in the story, namely Sir Crocodile and Enel. Sir Crocodile vs Dragon Luffy is a very interesting matchup in the Alabasta arc. Sir Crocodile cannot be touched in a normal way due to his Sand Logia, however the weakness of the Devil Fruit would still exist. The Sand Fruit can be clumped by liquids such as water or blood and can then be touched normally. In the original timeline, Luffy was able to defeat Crocodile in this way. In this timeline, the whole thing can happen quite similarly. However, Dragon Luffy could also use the help of his elemental abilities. Luffy could certainly inflict damage to Sir Crocodile with his Boro Breath. When sand is heated too much, it turns into glass. So could Dragon Luffy perhaps defeat Sir Crocodile in a completely different way and turn him into glass and then break him? Luffy actually doesn't kill his opponents. His victory destroys their dreams. According to Luffy, this is worse than leaving them alive. Crocodile is a bit of an exception here because he still clings to his Utopia plan, even after over 20 years in our world. After the Alabasta arc, the Destroyed crew would have traveled to Skypiea. Every Destroyed except for Luffy would have simply flown up with his Devil Fruit, but Luffy wants to take the true path to Skypiea, namely through a knock-up stream. In the original timeline, Luffy was only able to defeat Enel because he was made of rubber and could withstand and nullify his attacks. The huge electricity black box cannot be stopped by Dragon Luffy. He cannot stop it with his lightning breath, his whirlwinds or his Boro Breath. Dragon Luffy can try to stop it, but I don't think that he has a chance. In this timeline, Luffy couldn't have defeated Enel. Everything would have been hopeless. But Luffy wouldn't be Luffy if he couldn't find a solution to this problem. I believe that Luffy would have teamed up with Viper for this fight and they would have defeated Enel together. Although Dragon Luffy doesn't master Haki yet, he has enormous physical resistance due to his Devil Fruit. Electric attacks shouldn't do that much damage to him. Viper on the other hand possesses Sea Stone. With his Sea Stone and the 𝚑𝚑𝚑𝚑, he has already defeated Enel once. But before Luffy and Viper can defeat Enel, Luffy has to save Skypiea and its inhabitants. In the Skypiea arc, Luffy learns to float other things through his flame clouds, similar to Momonosuke on Onigashima. So Luffy simply takes Skypiea and moves it somewhere else. Luffy in his dragon form then takes Viper and flies with him to Enel. Even before the dude can steal the Golden Bell, Luffy protects Viper from Enel's attack until he touches him with his Sea Stone. Viper holds Enel to his body just like Goku held his brother, and then Luffy, uses his Boro Breath and defeats Enel. We must not forget how physically weak Enel actually is. The man was KO'd by Luffy with a few punches without any Haki or any gear forms. Even Arlong had to take more hits. Enel just wasn't used to taking hits, that's why he could never build up his defense. The following arcs are quite similar. Dragon loses to Aokiji, ice is very effective against dragons. Rob Lucci is easily defeated by Dragon Luffy, even Gekko Moria falls quite easily to Dragon Luffy. The next challenge for Dragon Luffy would have been Magellan and Blackbeard in the Impel Down arc. Against Magellan, Dragon Luffy would lose again. This time, however, he would recover much faster compared to the original timeline. After all, Zoan abilities can accelerate regeneration. In Impel Down, Luffy learns about Zoan Awakenings from Sir Crocodile, a power-up that Luffy absolutely wants to have in the future, but Crocodile doesn't know how to trigger a Zoan Awakening. Against Blackbeard, Dragon Luffy has a better chance than Rubber Luffy. Dragon Luffy wants to defeat Blackbeard in his hybrid form, but his Zoan form is instantly nullified by a touch. Through his Yami Yami no Mi, Blackbeard can deactivate his opponent's abilities with a touch. Without his Zoan strength boost, Luffy can't do much against Blackbeard. But actually this wasn't a real fight, they just clashed and then everyone went his ways. Arriving at Marineford, Luffy befriends Whitebeard again. In this timeline, Luffy has a huge advantage. He can simply fly to Ace, and Marco, Vista and Jozo provide cover for him against the Admirals. The rescue of Ace would progress much faster in this timeline. After all, Luffy's Impel Down allies would keep important characters busy. such as Mihawk or Moria. On the execution stand, Dragon Luffy would have to face Sengoku again, but this time he can create a huge balloon to block Sengoku's attack. Instead, Luffy floats the execution platform with his flame clouds, which then brings Sengoku out of balance. Of course, Luffy has no chance against Sengoku here either, but the few seconds he was able to create through the flame clouds were enough to save Ace. But similar to the original timeline, Ace still dies because Akainu provokes Ace. But at least we get to see the two brothers in a tag team before, only this time both brothers use their fire abilities. Then we come to the time skip and Rayleigh teaches Luffy the 3 types of Haki. After the time skip, destroyed pirates travel to the New World. There, Dragon Luffy has no problems defeating Hody Jones, Caesar Clown and even Doflamingo. In this timeline, Momonosuke would not have the artificial dragon fruit. As we remember, the fruit was only created because Kaido was held captive on Punk Hazard and Vegapunk was able to research his lineage factor. Without this research, there is no artificial dragon fruit. Too bad for Momonosuke. The Whole Cake Island arc would also play out differently. Luffy could, but wouldn't have to, use his love for food to defeat the sweet commanders Charlotte Cracker and Charlotte Katakuri. A big theme in the fight against Cracker and in the fight against Katakuri was food. Luffy had to eat hundreds of kilograms of cookies and mochi just to have a chance of winning. In this timeline, Luffy could simply use his elemental dragon abilities to defeat Cracker and Katakuri. Cookies and mochi should melt quickly with a Boro breath. In this scenery, the entire Big Mom's tea party would surely go up in flames. Escaping Whole Cake Island should not be a problem with a flying dragon. Luffy could easily face Katakuri in the mirror world, or he could simply grab the Thousand Sunny in his dragon form and fly away. In the open sea, the Stroids then could face Katakuri together. In this timeline, Pedro could even survive. I would even suggest that after the time skip, Luffy has become so strong through his Haki and his physical training with Rayleigh that he could take on Big Mom. After all, Zone Fruits enhance the physical abilities of their users. Although Luffy now has a Zone Fruit in the original timeline, it doesn't necessarily make him physically stronger. According to the Road to Laughdale chapters, it is implied that the Nika Fruit has properties of both a Paramecia and Zoan Fruit. The Zoan component would be Gear 5th, and the rest of the rubber abilities are the Paramecia fruit. Luffy's final challenge then would be Kaido in the Wano Kuni arc. But now you might be wondering what devil fruit Kaido ate if Luffy already has the dragon fruit. I think that Kaido instead ate the Okuchi no Makami fruit that Yamato ate in the original timeline. Even without a devil fruit, Kaido was a member of the Rock's pirate crew, so his devil fruit has only made an already powerful tank even more powerful. I think it would also be very interesting if Kaido had the devil fruit that is actually a kind of Wano guardian deity. Dragon Luffy against the mythical dog Kaido. In this match, various elements would clash, similar to the fight with Yamato and Kaido. Dragon Luffy will have learned advanced armaments Haki in Udon, and in the fight with Kaido he will learn to use his advanced Conqueror's Haki. I also believe that Luffy will awaken his dragon fruit in this battle. There is now an exciting theory that Kaido has not awakened his fruit because he does not use it for the desire for which it was created. In the original timeline, Momo could awaken his artificial dragon fruit. In this timeline, Luffy uses his dragon fruit to free Wano from Kaido's clutches and to protect the island. Azure dragons are mythical creatures that protect others. Through this original desire, Luffy succeeds in awakening his dragon fruit. This makes him faster, stronger and more resilient. Kaido cannot compete with this. Of course, it could also be that Kaido has his awakening here. However, since this was not addressed in the original timeline with his dragon fruit, I do not assume this in this timeline. Dragon Luffy manages to drive Kaido and the Beast Pirates out of Wano, and Dragon Luffy becomes one of the new emperors in the New World. In another timeline, Kaido could of course have stolen the Gum Gum fruit from the world government. The fruit is still available if Luffy doesn't have it. Through Kaido's flashback, we know that he is not a big fan of the world government. I could easily imagine Kaido randomly attacking world government ships to annoy them, and then he accidentally stumbles on the Gum Gum fruit. After all, Luffy has a fairly easy time during his adventure with his dragon fruit. There are some opponents who could damage Luffy, but most of them don't seem to have a chance against Dragon Luffy. If this run of Luffy were a kind of speed run, then the dragon fruit would definitely be one of the meta fruits for this run. Who wouldn't want to be able to transform into a dragon? Luffy's Devil Fruit is one of the most important aspects of the story. But what would happen if Luffy ate a different Devil Fruit instead of the Gomu Gomu no Mi or the mythical Nika fruit? How would the One Piece story develop if Luffy had snagged the Fire Fruit instead of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, who will be Luffy's toughest opponent in the story? Let's find out. But first, let's check out the Mera Mera no Mi. The Mera Mera no Mi is one of the few known Logia fruits in the story. With the abilities of the Fire Fruit, the user can produce fire, manipulate it, and transform himself into fire. This makes the user immune to physical attacks without haki. Almost every Logia fruit also has a specific weakness. The whole thing is reminiscent of the rock paper scissors principle from the Pokemon games. For example, the Fire Fruit is weak against the Magma Fruit, but also against water. The classic Devil Fruit weakness also applies here. In this run, Shanks simply found the Mera Mera no Mi on Six's island and brought it to Fusha village where Luffy ate it. Some of you have already said in the video about Luffy and the Dragon Fruit that Ace would receive the Gum Gum Fruit instead of Luffy, so be it. In this timeline, Ace has the Gum Gum Fruit. Luffy starts his journey like in the original timeline at the age of 17. In the East Blue Saga, Luffy has to face a total of 7 antagonists in the story. Many of the fights will be quite similar to the original timeline, but one of these fights will be much more difficult for Fire Luffy. Luffy's first opponent in the East Blue is Alvida. She is defeated directly by a Heiken. Next up is Morgan, who attempts to attack Luffy with his wooden accent, but quickly realizes that he cannot cause physical damage to Luffy. In the anime, Morgan explains the concept of Devil Fruits more extensively. According to Morgan, they are Devil Fruit users who can create fire or trigger tsunamis, so if Morgan encounters a Luffy with a Fire Fruit, he realizes that the legends about the Fire Devil Fruit user are really true. Morgan is also easily defeated with a Heiken. Next up we have Buggy, Luffy's first Devil Fruit opponent in the story. This former member of the Roger Pirates and future Yonko has no chance against our Fire Boy. He is also easily defeated by a Heiken. At Syrup Village, Captain Kuro is also easily defeated. Similar to Morgan, Kuro realizes that none of his attacks have a chance against this Luffy. He could try to take the other Straw Hats hostage to get an unfair advantage in the fight, but with Luffy's ranged capabilities that should be no problem. Kuro is also easily defeated. Don Krieg is up next. Of course he doesn't have a chance against Fire Luffy. It would be so funny to see how he would react when he finds out that none of his gadgets has a chance against Fire Luffy. His tactic at Baratie would certainly be to throw Luffy into the water. However, since none of the Krieg pirates could catch Luffy, he would have no chance of throwing him into the water. Next up we have Arlong. This racist fishman will be the first serious opponent of Fire Luffy. Arlong's swimming pool was already a big problem for Rubber Luffy. Arlong also uses water attack. In general, fishmen and fishman karate are a weakness of this Devil Fruit. However, fishmen themselves are not immune to fire attacks. This allows Luffy to continue to inflict damage on Arlong and defeat him. Similar to Rubber Luffy, Fire Luffy will surely win this fight. However, he will have to dodge many attacks of Arlong. If Luffy were to play dumb, he could theoretically lose this fight as well, because if he really falls into Arlong's swimming pool in this fight, he would take enormous damage. After all, Fire Luffy is a fireman. Luffy could also try to destroy the Arlong Park beforehand to destroy the swimming pool and eliminate the biggest weakness in this fight. In Loketown, Fire Luffy then faces Smoker. This fight will develop very similarly to the fight between Ace and Smoker in Alabasta. This fight had no real outcome. The abilities of the fruits did not directly harm each other. Fire seems to not damage Smoke, and Smoke also doesn't damage Fire. The decisive advantage of Smoker is of course his Kairoseki Yeet. This could weaken Luffy's Devil Fruit. Smoker could capture Luffy if Dragon doesn't come to the rescue again, so this fight would end in a draw if Luffy can dodge the Yeet, and end in a loss if Luffy cannot dodge the Yeet of Smoker. After the adventures in the East Blue, the Straw Hat crew then travels toward the Grand Line to face new adventures there. In the East Blue, most of Luffy's opponents simply don't have a chance against him because they don't have Haki, have little to no water ability, or don't have a Devil Fruit that can counter the Fire Fruit. On the first half of the Grand Line, Luffy has to face 11 important antagonists in order to continue his adventure. Even the first opponents on the Grand Line don't have a direct chance against Fire Luffy. Galdino's Wax has to face its natural enemy. This time the Wax figure cabinet doesn't even happen on Little Garden. Fire Luffy defeats Galdino with a Heiken. Even Warpool on Drum Island doesn't really have a chance against this Luffy. None of Warpool's attacks can harm Fire Luffy. He's also easily defeated by 1 or 2 Heikens. Similar to Ace's visit on Drum Island, the island's climate changes. After Luffy shows up on Drum Island, it suddenly stops snowing. Then it gets really exciting in Alabasta. Fire Luffy has to face the first of the 7 Warlords of the Sea. This is the second pure Logia fight in this timeline. Crocodile is one of those antagonists who would find his opponent's weakness. Crocodile is very intelligent and calculating. He will certainly try to somehow get water to fight Fire Luffy. If Fire Luffy can increase his temperature to 1700 degrees Celsius, he would be able to turn Sir Crocodile into glass. In this way, he would not need Haki to defeat Sir Crocodile. Otherwise, I would imagine the fight between the two being quite balanced. Similar to the original timeline, Luffy could use water to make Sir Crocodile tangible and then inflict damage to him. Luffy will have similar physical abilities to the original timeline due to his training with Sabo and Ace. The next fight would be against Bellamy on Jaya. Similar to the original timeline, Bellamy is defeated with one attack. In this case, however, it is a Hiken instead of a Gum Gum pistol. With the help of the knock-up stream, the destroyed pirates then travel to Skypiea. There, Fire Luffy has to face the self-proclaimed god Eneru. The third Logia fight in this timeline is coming up. This opponent of Fire Luffy is similar to the fight in the 𝙬𝚙𝚅 Fruit timeline. A lightning strike can trigger up to 28,000 degrees Celsius in the air. However, this heat is only active for a fraction of a second. This means theoretically that the Goro Goro no Mi would be able to burn Fire Luffy similar to the Mago Mago no Mi. Luffy would have to avoid many of Eneru's attacks. At the same time, he would have no way of inflicting damage on Eneru himself. Without the help of Viper and his Kairoseki, Fire Luffy would have no chance against this enemy. Also, like in the 𝙬𝚙𝚅 Fruit timeline, a tag team takes place to defeat Eneru. However, if it were a solo match, Luffy would have lost there and the run would be over. Back in the Blue Sea, the destroyed pirates then meet Aokiji on Long Ring Longland. This is the first Admiral destroyed pirates encounter. Aokiji has eaten the Hihi no Mi. The fourth Logia fight is about to start. At first glance, one would think that the Fire Fruit has a direct advantage over Kuzan. It's kind of true, but not really. Luffy could certainly not get frozen through Kuzan's ice, and he could also protect his crew from freezing. But similar to Pokemon, the type advantage is not everything. Kuzan is several levels higher than Luffy, and he also has at least 2 types of Haki. Luffy could certainly fight against Kuzan's Devil Fruit, however Kuzan's Devil Fruit is only one aspect of the fight. Kuzan is the first opponent of Fire Luffy with Armament Haki. In addition, Kuzan has very powerful punches that can even compete with Garb. If we take these aspects into account, Fire Luffy has also no chance against Kuzan in this timeline. He faces him in a one-on-one and then saves his crew afterwards, like in the original timeline. In Water 7 and Ines Lobby, Fire Luffy then faces Rob Lucci. This time, however, Rob Lucci has no chance against Fire Luffy due to the lack of Haki. Similar to Crocodile, however, I can imagine that Rob Lucci tries to somehow get water to harm Fire Luffy. If Rob Lucci fails to do so, it's an easy win for Luffy. The same thing happens with Gekko Moria. It is still unclear whether he has Haki or not. The dude was traveling in the New World and had a clash with Kaido, so I honestly expected him to have Haki. However, since Haki is tied to the user's will, it could also be that Gekko Moria can no longer use Haki due to this defeat against Kaido and his broken will. Without Haki, the guy has no chance against Fire Luffy either. The next important opponent is Magellan in Impel Down. We have to assume 2 sceneries here. In one scenery, Magellan's poison has no effect on Fire Luffy because he cannot touch him. In the second scenery, Magellan's poison can harm Fire Luffy and defeat him. If Magellan does not have Haki, he is also unable to defeat Luffy, then Magellan's poison cannot harm Luffy. Magellan is not a Logia Devil Fruit user, so there would not really be a Logia clash here. If Magellan has Haki, he could poison Luffy and defeat him similar to Rubber Luffy. In Impel Down, Luffy also faces Blackbeard. The 5th Logia battle begins. Even though it was only a short exchange of blows, we already know the outcome of this fight. It's just Ace versus Blackbeard all over again. The only difference is that Luffy is much weaker in the story at this point than Ace was during his fight with Blackbeard. In this timeline, Luffy would also have no chance against Blackbeard and the fight would have to be cancelled again. After the Impel Down art, Luffy goes straight to Marineford to save Rubber Ace. To save Ace, Luffy has to face some characters on Marineford, but in the end, Sengoku stands in his way again. Rubber Luffy has a certain resistance to physical attacks, that's why he was able to block Sengoku's attack. However, Fire Luffy would not be able to do that, so it would be important to Luffy to quickly free Ace with Galdino so that Rubber Ace can block Sengoku's attack. Otherwise, I don't see how they want to block his attack properly. Here too, Luffy could try to use the scaffold to his advantage somehow. Unfortunately, Ace dies again in this timeline because he lets himself be provoked by Akainu again. But like in the original timeline, Luffy does not have a chance against Akainu. On the first half of the Grand Line, many opponents of Fire Luffy don't have a direct chance against him. However, Fire Luffy also has to take some losses on the Grand Line. He doesn't really have a chance against every opponent. Kuzan, Eneru and Blackbeard pose real difficulties for Fire Luffy. Then we come to the time skip. Rayleigh teaches Luffy all 3 types of Haki, 2 years pass and the Straw Hat crew reunites on Sabaody. In the New World, Luffy will face a total of 7 antagonists. The newly acquired Haki will surely help Luffy in the New World. On Fishman Island, Luffy must face Hody Jones. Like Arlong, Hody Jones poses a certain threat to Luffy. Hody Jones has become much stronger due to the energy steroids. He can be quite dangerous for Fire Luffy through various water attacks. Luffy must avoid Hody's attacks using his observation Haki. Additionally, he must let the fight take place in the plaza. If they switch to the Noah during the fight, Fire Luffy could generate fire in the water, similar to how Rubber Luffy did. This makes little sense, but since it is established in the manga, we will go with it. But this fight will definitely not be as easy for Fire Luffy as in the original timeline. Destroyed pirates then travel to 𝚌𝚙𝚒𝚝. There Luffy has to fight Caesar. This is the 6th and for now the final Logia battle in this timeline. Caesar is another natural enemy of the Mera Mera no Mi. Caesar can create carbon dioxide through his gas fruit to extinguish fire. In this fight, Luffy would have to fight Caesar with his physical abilities. Otherwise, he would not be able to harm him with his fire. Caesar's body is vulnerable to physical attacks. If Fire Luffy can avoid Caesar's carbon dioxide attacks using his observation Haki, he can surely inflict some wounds on him. This fight could also end in a loss if Caesar manages to deprive Luffy of oxygen, similar to what happens in the original timeline. Or by somehow turning off Fire Luffy's flames. Who would have thought that Caesar could be one of the most challenging fights in this run? Nevertheless, Luffy and his friends would still get the victory in the end, as Law and Smoker are also present on 𝚌𝚙𝚒𝚝 along with the Straw Hat crew. On Dressrosa, Luffy then faces Doflamingo. This is a very interesting fight, similar to the original timeline. Depending on how well Fire Luffy can use his Devil Fruit at this point, he may even be able to burn Doflamingo's strings. In the original timeline, Zabo was probably not able to destroy the birdcage. Maybe in this timeline, the strings could be affected by fire. Luffy has much more experience with this Devil Fruit than Zabo does in the original timeline. The next opponents are Cracker and Katakuri on Whole Cake Island. In the original timeline, Luffy had to fight both of them for several hours, one at the beginning of the arc and one at the end of the arc. Cracker would have been defeated in this timeline similar to the original timeline. Nami would assist in the fight by wetting the biscuits, and then Luffy would be able to eat the cookies or burn Cracker. The fight against Katakuri would run pretty similarly. While fleeing from Big Mom, the crew could face Katakuri on the ship, or Luffy could flee with Katakuri back to the Mirror World. If the fight takes place in the Mirror World, Luffy could set the world on fire and force Katakuri to melt. Unfortunately, this fight in this timeline will not be a proper mirror match, as Fire Luffy's abilities are not necessarily similar to Katakuri's. Katakuri will try to dodge Luffy's attacks more and more with his advanced observation Haki. However, as Luffy can set the mirror world on fire, it will become increasingly difficult for Katakuri over time, leading to Luffy's victory. On Whole Cake Island, Luffy briefly faces Big Mom. In this timeline, he could try to fight against Big Mom. I suspect that Luffy does not have a direct chance against Big Mom, similar to the original timeline. His physical abilities simply are not enough to harm Big Mom. He needs the advanced armament and Conqueror's Haki for that. In Wano Kuni, Fire Luffy faces Kaido. The fight against Kaido will take place similar to the original timeline. Fire Luffy will not immediately face Kaido in a one-on-one fight, but with the other supernovas. Kaido then would have been weakened by the Red Scabbards, the Supernova, and later by Yamato. In this timeline, Kaido's Boro Breath attacks will have no effect on Luffy. If Kaido fights in his zone form, he will rely on his Kaifu attack and his Thunder Breath. In this timeline, Luffy will also have learned advanced armament and Conqueror's Haki, which will finally allow him to harm Kaido. However, in his base form, Luffy will not be able to defeat Kaido. Similar to chapter 1043, Luffy will have to trigger his awakening, allowing him to awaken the full potential of his Logia fruit. Unfortunately, as of chapter 1087, we have not seen a confirmed Logia awakening in the story, therefore we can only speculate on what a Logia awakening will be capable of. One possibility is that a Logia awakening can permanently change the climate of an island, as we saw on Raijin Island or 𝚌𝚙𝚝𝚝. Alternatively, it could work similar to the domain expansion from Jujutsu Kaisen. Can Logia awakenings possibly trap their opponents in their own created parallel world, where their elements can expand infinitely and their opponents has no way to escape? That would definitely be a broken ability. We already know that there are devil fruits who can create other dimensions. If we take the second scenery, then Fire Luffy could trap Kaido in a fire dimension with his awakening. Although Kaido could unleash his most powerful attack, the Fire Dragon wouldn't have a chance against a Fire Logia user. With the help of his awakening, Luffy can then defeat Kaido in this timeline as well, and Wano would be safe again. But how good is the Fire Fruit actually? Of the 25 fights in this run, Luffy won most of the fights with ease with the Fire Fruit. Some fights, such as against Arlong or Hody Jones, proved to be a bit more tricky due to his abilities. Against Smoker, Luffy could probably get a draw, as we have not seen the Fire Fruit cause damage to the Smoke Fruit. Sir Crocodile, on the other hand, cannot do much against Fire Luffy's heat. Luffy would have had a hard time against Eneru, Blackbeard, Kuzan and Caesar in this run. These are all other Logia users in the story. These characters are either physically stronger than Luffy, or their Devil Fruit can somehow counter the Fire Fruit. Caesar surprises here with his Devil Fruit. In the original timeline, no one takes this character seriously, even though he actually is a very powerful Devil Fruit. Sengoku is also a challenge here, but I think that will be the case in every run. Defeating or stopping the Fleet Admiral at Marineford without Haki can be extremely difficult. I would rank the Fire Fruit similar to the Dragon Fruit in the S tier. What if instead of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, Luffy had eaten the Yami Yami no Mi? That's what we're going to find out today. This run will completely shatter the storyline as we know it in One Piece. The reason for this is quite simple. The Dark Fruit, or Yami Yami no Mi, is one of the most powerful devil fruits in the story of One Piece. This Logia fruit allows the user to create and control darkness. Apparently, the user of the fruit cannot transform into darkness. However, this could simply be because the user is constantly exposed to sunlight and therefore cannot reach his Logia form. Through the Yami Yami no Mi, the user can attract and repel things. This devil fruit also has some abilities of the gravity fruit, like a sort of black hole. According to Blackbeard himself, the potential of this devil fruit is limitless. The special thing about this devil fruit is not necessarily its classic Logia attributes. Through the Yami Yami no Mi, one can nullify the abilities of other users. One can make other Logia users tangible without Haki and thus bypass their devil fruit abilities. The Yami Yami no Mi is therefore a hard counter for practically any devil fruit. The ability is a bit of reminiscent of Asta from Black Clover. The weakness of the fruit is that it attracts everything, including attacks. Nullifying devil fruits only works through touch so far. If someone can break free from the touch, the character regains their abilities. By nullifying the abilities, the user also becomes very vulnerable to attacks. If Luffy snacked on this devil fruit, it would break the timeline as we know it in One Piece. Luffy would achieve many things with this devil fruit that he wouldn't have achieved otherwise. Let's now take a closer look at this run. Similar to the other runs, Shanks somehow got his hands on the Yami Yami no Mi in this timeline. Through the discovery of the fruit, Shanks causes many positive events in the story, but also some unpredictable new events. Luffy eats the Yami Yami no Mi in Makino's party spa, and Ace then gets the Gomu Gomu no Mi as in the Fire Fruit timeline. Yami Luffy's childhood runs similar to the original timeline. At the age of 17, he begins his journey in the East Blue. Similar to the original timeline, he quickly deals with most of the antagonists in the East Blue saga. Alvida goes down really easily with one attack. Captain Morgan can talk about devil fruits again, but then he is easily defeated by Yami Luffy. The exact same thing happens to Buggy. Captain Kuro is also defeated very quickly due to the abilities of the Yami Yami no Mi. Because of the attraction of the gravity, Kuro cannot move as quickly as he would like to. Don Krieg would also quickly realize that he cannot do anything against Yami Luffy. Due to Luffy's training in his childhood, he is also superior to Don Krieg in this timeline. In Arlong Park against Arlong, Yami Luffy has some difficulties, but that will happen in practically every timeline. As a devil fruit user, the first fight against the fishmen is always a challenge. Yami Luffy has no idea what fishmen are capable of, and Yami Luffy really has to be careful not to fall into Arlong's pool. However, physically, Yami Luffy is superior to Arlong. With some luck, of which Luffy has a lot in the story, he can then defeat Arlong. In Loguetown, Yami Luffy then faces Smoker. However, the fight between the two will not go as in the other runs. In this run, Luffy can grab Smoker with the help of his devil fruit. While Smoker can try to break free from Luffy's grip to trap him in his smoke, Yami Luffy could simply pull Smoker back to him and touch him to nullify his abilities. The problem with Luffy vs Smoker in the East Blue is always that Luffy couldn't touch him. He's capable of doing so in this timeline. Unfortunately, we do not know if Luffy is physically strong enough to defeat Smoker here. Smoker's physical strength is only highlighted after the time skip, but I think that Yami Luffy could at least cause damage to Smoker here and then flee with his crew. Luffy therefore doesn't need the help of his father in this run. With the help of the 𝙗𝚘𝚙𝚎 no Mi, Luffy has the easiest time in the East Blue so far. None of the opponents pose a real threat to him. Even Smoker with his Logia Devil Fruit is not really a problem for Yami Luffy. So far so good, but how will his adventure on the Grand Line? Yami Luffy's adventure on the Grand Line is similar to the original timeline. Destroyed pirates climb Reverse Mountain, Luffy decides to help Vivi, and then they defeat the first antagonists on the Grand Line. On Little Garden, Yami Luffy faces Waxman Mr. 3. However, Galdino falls victim to the 𝙗𝚘𝚙𝚎 no Mi. Galdino tries to create his wax figure cabinet, but Yami Luffy nullifies his abilities with a touch and defeats him with a few blows. The encounter with Warpole is similar. Yami Luffy's touch prevents Warpole from using his Munch Munch fruit and his factory. This leaves Warpole as a small round tin man who is easily defeated by Yami Luffy. In this timeline, destroyed pirates do not encounter Warpole on the sea, Blackbeard does not have the 𝙗𝚘𝚙𝚎 no Mi and is still a member of the Whitebeard pirates. On Alabasta, Yami Luffy faces the boss of the Baroque Works, Sir Crocodile. The fight against Sir Crocodile could be as challenging as in the original timeline. Yami Luffy can avoid Sir Crocodile's sand abilities, but he must touch him to nullify his powers. This is not always easy, and Yami Luffy must dodge Sir Crocodile's deadly sand attacks. Sir Crocodile's experience and mastery of his fruit make it challenging to fight him with the 𝙗𝚘𝚙𝚎 no Mi. However, Yami Luffy wins the fight, but it takes multiple attempts, just like in the original timeline. In this timeline, Luffy and Ace do not meet on Alabasta, Blackbeard did not kill Thatch, so Ace does not have to pursue him. In the Jaya arc, Luffy does not meet Blackbeard. Like I already said, Blackbeard is still a member of the Whitebeard pirates. However, Luffy still fights Bellamy and easily defeats him. After the adventure on Alabasta and Jaya, the Straw-Hat Pirates use the Knock-Up Stream to travel to Skypiea. On the Sky Islands, destroyed pirates search for gold. There, Yami Luffy must face the self-proclaimed god Eneru. Similar to the original timeline, Yami Luffy can touch Eneru, but this time it's very dangerous. His lightning attacks can quickly defeat Yami Luffy if he cannot avoid them. His observation arc allows him to predict his opponent's attacks, making it difficult for Yami Luffy to land a touch and nullify his Logia abilities. However, once Yami Luffy manages to touch him, he can quickly defeat Enel with physical attacks. Enel is not resistant to physical damage. Yami Luffy can try to distract Eneru using his Devil Fruit powers, but he may need his friends' help to defeat him in a tag team battle. Back in the Blue Sea, the Destroyed Pirates participate in the Davy Back fight on Long Ring Longland. Afterwards, Yami Luffy faces Aokiji, the first admiral in the story. Even if Yami Luffy can touch Kuzan and nullify his Logia abilities, he cannot defeat him physically. Kuzan is physically on a similar level to Old Garb, making it impossible for a pre-time skip Luffy without Haki to defeat him regardless of his Devil Fruit. On Water 7, destroyed pirates try to repair the Going Merry, only to learn that their ship cannot be saved. Robin flees, and the crew is drawn into a conflict with the world government. Luffy must face the leopard Rob Lucci. Yami Luffy can nullify Lucci's Zoan abilities if he can touch him, but Lucci is still fast and ruthless. Luffy must dodge Lucci's attacks and deal as much damage as possible when he nullifies his powers. Lucci will break free from Yami Luffy's grasp several times. In the original timeline, Luffy has a certain resistance to physical attacks due to the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Lucci's attacks can still deal significant damage to him. In the 𝙗𝚘𝚙𝚎 no Mi timeline, Luffy has to be very careful of these attacks, but if he uses his new ability very tactically, I believe that Luffy can defeat Lucci. The fight against Gekko Moria on Thriller Bark is much easier. Moria was not a physically strong opponent for Luffy. In this timeline, Yami Luffy can nullify Moria's powers and the shadows will return to their owners. The rest is taken care of by a few blows from Yami Luffy. However, shortly before his defeat, Gekko Moria warns Yami Luffy that he will face a similar fate as Gekko Moria when he enters the New World. He will lose everything he has. And now we come to a very interesting scenery. The Destroyed Pirates are separated from each other on Sabaody as in the original timeline. Luffy ends up back on Amazon Lily and has to make friends with the local Amazons. The journey can then develop in two different directions from here. In this timeline, Blackbeard did not obtain the 𝙗𝚘𝚙𝚎 no Mi. Thatch is still alive, Ace was not delivered to the Marines, Blackbeard did not become a Shishibukai, Luffy did not break into Impel Down, and there was no war at Marineford. In this timeline, Luffy does not have to witness how Ace dies. and Blackbeard remains a member of the Whitebeard Pirates. The original plan before Luffy wanted to save Ace was to return to 𝚬𝚙𝚑𝚝 within 3 days. After the adventures on 𝚬𝚙𝚑𝚡 Lily, there are 2 sceneries for what could happen next. Either we go to the original timeline, even without Ace's death, there will be a time skip and our heroes will continue the story. Or we look at a timeline without a time skip. Without Ace's death, Luffy has not experienced the trauma that would cause Rayleigh to advise him to wait 2 years for a reunion with his nakama. Let's take a look at both sceneries, but let's start with the scenery without a time skip. The original plan was to meet again after 3 days to travel to Fishman Island. In the timeline without a time skip, destroyed pirates meet again on 𝚬𝚙𝚑𝚝 Archipelago after 3 days and travel to Fishman Island with a coated ship. The adventure on Fishman Island is slightly different in this timeline. Fishman Island has no problem and therefore no conflict for our heroes. The island is still under the protection of Whitebeard, so there's currently peace and quiet. Jinbei is still a Shishibukai and he will not become a member of the Straw Hat Pirates. Luffy does not challenge Big Mom here, so he doesn't have to protect Fishman Island. There was no fight between Akainu and Aokiji on Punk Hazard, they are still admirals. Sengoku is still fleet admiral. In the New World, Law strongly drove the Straw Hat Pirates route. Law could also contact Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates in this timeline, the goal could be the same. After all, Luffy intends to face all the Yonko, Shanks and Whitebeard should eventually become Luffy's enemies. But whether he really makes it to them in this timeline is very questionable. Law meets the Straw Hat Pirates in the New World and they travel to Punk Hazard together. Law wants to continue his plan to overthrow Doflamingo. In this timeline, Punk Hazard is not yet full of ice and fire, it is a fairly tropical and seemingly deserted island, but the island is not really deserted. Caesar is still conducting illegal research on weapon of mass destruction after escaping from the government. In chapter 504, Doflamingo tells Disco that the Age of the Smile has begun. This means that Caesar has already been researching the Smile Fruits before the time skip. In a tag team battle, Yami, Luffy and Law manage to capture Caesar to blackmail Doflamingo. The same demands are made as in the original timeline. Doflamingo should give up his title as a Shishibukai. There's one key difference here, our heroes do not meet Kinemon and Momonosuke on Punk Hazard in this timeline. They still have to wait 2 years till they get transported into that future. The SAD on Punk Hazard is destroyed and the Straw Hat Pirates then want to confront Doflamingo. But on Dressrosa, this time everything is different. Without Haki, Yami Luffy has no chance against Doflamingo, even with Law's help. The former Celestial Dragon easily defeats Yami Luffy. Yami Luffy can nullify Doflamingo's Devil Fruit, but he has no chance against Doflamingo's physical abilities and his Haki. We must not forget Doflamingo's crew on Dressrosa. Pika could even prevent our heroes from reaching Doflamingo. In this timeline, without a time skip, Luffy, Law and the Straw Hat Pirates are killed by Doflamingo and his crew. The foreshadowing from Gecko Moria comes true. The Straw Hat Pirates, just like the Gecko Pirates, have lost everything. If only things could be different. Last time in One Piece. Silver's Rayleigh makes Luffy an offer he shouldn't refuse. In the original timeline, Rayleigh suggests Luffy to wait 2 years for the reunion with his nakama. As we just saw in an alternative timeline, it would be fatal to travel to the New World without Haki training. Luffy accepts Rayleigh's offer, the two perform a publicity stunt so that the Straw Hat crew gets the message for the time skip. As a result, the time skip occurs in this timeline as well. For most of the Straw Hats, the time skip would also be quite similar, except for Sanji. Since Ivankov continues to party in the Impel Down at level 5.5, he cannot train Sanji. But Sanji still fights the other Okama to become stronger. 2 years pass and the Straw Hat crew travels to Fishman Island with the coated Sunny. Fishman Island continues to be safe. Of course, a fight with Hody Jones could happen again. If it comes to that, Luffy can easily defeat him with his Haki and his darkness abilities. Luffy learns in this arc that Fishman Island is under the protection of the Yonko Whitebeard. Someone might also mention the commanders of the crew, which would then inform Luffy that Ace is a member of this pirate crew. Also in this timeline, Jinbei does not become a member of the Straw Hat crew. This is because Luffy and Jinbei simply lack the shared experiences at Impel Down, Marineford and then on Fishman Island. In this timeline, Jinbei is still one of the Shishibukai. The next arcs then run quite similarly. Caesar is defeated quite easily by Yami Luffy. Luffy is much more effective in the use of his Devil Fruit through the time skip. Observation Haki allows him to dodge much better, and he now also has a much better idea of when to nullify his opponent's abilities. Caesar without his Logia Fruit is not a real opponent. After the kidnapping of Caesar, we go to Dressrosa. Without the time skip, Luffy would have died here. But with Haki and with a better handling of his Logia fruit, Yami Luffy can defeat Doflamingo and his strings. Luffy, by nullifying Doflamingo's devil fruit, could also nullify the birdcage. This takes the fight to a whole different dynamic. Doflamingo is defeated and our heroes make their way to Zou. This arc has some important differences from the original timeline. Since Ace is not dead, his devil fruit cannot be used as a prize in the Corrida Colosseum. As a result, Luffy is also not distracted in the Corrida Colosseum and cannot make friends there. The Destroyed Grand Fleet doesn't get formed, without the war on Marineford, Zabu's memories don't come back either, and he doesn't go to Dressrosa to win the Devil Fruit of Ace. Ace is alive, and his will does not need to be inherited by anyone. All three brothers are alive in this timeline, but Luffy would not have actively met Ace yet, and Zabu's memories would not have returned yet. They are all alive, but there hasn't been a real reunion between the three brothers yet. Luffy and Ace also don't even know that Zabu is still alive. Sanji then gets invited to his arranged marriage, and Luffy and the Sanji retrieval team then travel to Whole Cake Island to save him. Luffy makes short work of the two Charlotte brothers. Yami Luffy quickly learns through a touch of Cookie Cracker that this is not his real body. This is because Cracker can continue to use his abilities. Luffy also succeeds in this timeline with the help of Nami to make the cookies wet so that Luffy can eat them. But Luffy could also destroy Cracker's cookies with his Haki and his physical abilities to get to his true body. As soon as Luffy touches him, he can no longer produce cookies, and thus Cracker's ultimate defense is weakened. This allows Yami Luffy to defeat him. Against Katakuri it goes pretty similar to the original timelines. The big difference is the lack of Jinbei in this arc. This is because Jinbei is still a Shishibukai and Fishman Island is not under Big Mom's protection, and thus Jinbei is not in her service. The Destroyed Crew is missing an important ally here. Somehow the Destroyed Crew must manage to surf Big Mom's candy waves without Jinbei. The battle between Yami Luffy and Katakuri takes place in the mirror world. The two will fight for several hours, just like in the original timeline. Yami Luffy does not have to learn how Katakuri's devil fruit and his Haki work in this timeline. After all, he can simply touch Katakuri with his devil fruit to nullify his abilities. Katakuri will try to avoid Yami Luffy's touches with his stoic nature, however, combined with the attraction of his black holes, it becomes increasingly difficult for Katakuri. The fight between the two could end in a physical draw and a mental victory for Luffy, similar to the original timeline. On Wano Kuni, Yami Luffy then faces Kaido as in the original timeline. The first time he gets one-shotted, and the second time he got hit by Advanced Conqueror's Haki. The fight between Luffy and Kaido in this timeline would be very interesting. Yami Luffy could stop Kaido from using his own abilities a few times. Through the black holes, I'm sure he could also soak up a Boro breath or two from Kaido. However, Kaido is a beast. Even without his own abilities, this Yonko is one of the strongest characters in this universe. That means Luffy would have to come up with something more than just taking away his opponent's zone abilities. If Luffy gets his awakening here, then he could possibly turn the entire environment into darkness and thereby create a state that Kaido can no longer use his zone abilities at all. Then it would be a purely physical fight that Luffy might win in the end. Because then Kaido couldn't use his Fire Dragon finisher and he would have to give up his regenerative abilities. Also in this timeline, Luffy would somehow manage to defeat Kaido through his awakening, similar to the original timeline. The Yami Yami no Mi is really a broken devil fruit. The whole storyline of One Piece would have developed in a completely different direction if Luffy had eaten this devil fruit. Ace wouldn't have died, and the three brothers could certainly have a reunion in the future. Against many opponents, the Yami Yami no Mi is a very good counter. However, against physically strong opponents, Luffy has to be really careful. With Ace surviving, Luffy might have traveled to the New World without a time skip. Jinbei would not have become a member of the Destroyed Crew. Luffy's adventure with the Destroyed Crew and with Law would have failed. So Luffy can only survive this run if it comes to a time skip. Unfortunately, the natural story run would not allow him to do that here. Therefore, the Yami Yami no Mi gets a few points deducted here. Even though this Logia fruit is one of the most powerful devil fruits in the story, Yami Luffy has some problems with it in this timeline. Therefore, I would rank the fruit in the A tier. The jacket fruit is a strange devil fruit. So what would happen if Luffy got it at the beginning of the story? You won't believe how well this devil fruit fits Luffy, his character and the story of One Piece. But what can the jacket fruit actually do? The effect of the fruit is quite simple. The user of the fruit transforms into a jacket and then other characters can wear the user in their jacket form. If they wear the user, then the user of the fruit apparently gains control over the body of the person who wears the jacket. More or less, the effect of the fruit works like kind of a fusion, only with the difference that one person retains consciousness. This devil fruit was randomly used in the 𝚗𝚙𝚒𝚘𝚝 for a relatively unimportant character. But if the right person with the appropriate crew ate this fruit, then the jacket fruit would become one of the most powerful devil fruits in the story. But the fruit has one weakness. The user cannot force anyone to wear the jacket. That means the fusions work on a certain voluntary basis. You need friends to fully utilize the power of the fruit. So the jacket fruit is actually the nakama fruit. The more strong friends you have who trust you, the stronger you are in handling this fruit. So how would the story of One Piece have gone if Luffy had eaten the jacket fruit? The story begins as usual. Shanks brings another devil fruit to Fuchsia village, a young Luffy eats the fruit and transforms into a jacket for the first time. The Red Hair Pirates of course burst out laughing at this sight. In the next 10 years Luffy trains with his brothers to start his pirate adventure. Sabo and Ace are also the first characters to wear Luffy as a jacket to test his fruit. Luffy realized that this devil fruit is perfect for him. With this devil fruit he can fight together with his friends and make his friends stronger through his own abilities. Unfortunately, Luffy does not have a large friend circle at this time. At the age of 17, Luffy begins his journey to change that. The first enemies in the East Blue have no chance against Luffy. The first fight is against Alvida. Luffy could easily win the fight with Kobe's help, but Jacket Luffy decides to help Kobe build his self-confidence. He asks Kobe to wear him so that he can defeat Alvida together. Jacket Kobe defeats Alvida and Kobe gains the courage to pursue his dream. The two of them then travel to Shell's Town. There Luffy wants to recruit Zoro into his crew and Kobe wants to join the Marines. Through Zoro, Luffy could finally know what it's like to be a swordsman. The plot develops in a similar way, but Luffy has to hurry in the search for the swords. In the original timeline, Luffy saved Kobe and Zoro from the bullets of the Marines. If Luffy arrives here a little earlier, he can also free them with his jacket fruit. Zoro is freed and has his swords back. Luffy transforms then back into a jacket so that Zoro can wear him. Reluctantly, Zoro agrees. Luro is then born. He then faces Morgan, Kobe faces 𝚘𝚘𝚝. In this timeline, Kobe has much more courage due to his supposed victory against Alvida. Morgan and 𝚘𝚘𝚝 are defeated and Kobe joins the Marines. Luffy and Zoro then travel to Orange Town. Luffy wants to meet more friends to experience even more transformations. In Orange Town, Luffy meets Nami. A jacket transformation with Zoro doesn't make sense in the fight against Buggy. Therefore, Luffy asks Nami for help. She doesn't want to help Luffy at first, but after seeing Luffy help Shu and defeat Moji and Richie, she agrees to help him against Buggy. But only if she gets Buggy's treasures. Lumi is then born to face Buggy. This fight runs quite similar to the original timeline, only that Luffy is a bit more sneaky through Nami's attributes. Buggy is defeated and the adventure of the Straw Hat Pirates continues. In Syrup Village, our heroes meet Usopp and fight off against Captain Kuro. As in the original timeline, Luffy befriends Usopp and offers his help in the fight against Kuro. Usopp then confronts Kuro, and as in the original timeline, Kuro is defeated with a powerful headbutt. Usopp joins the crew and our heroes head towards the Baratie. There our heroes meet Sanji. Luffy and Sanji fuse to Lungi. Through Luffy, Sanji learns to believe in his dreams and process his skills towards Jeff. The fight against Don Creek ends by breaking his armor. Next they head to Arlong Park to bring Nami back into the crew. Here a second jacket fusion with Nami occurs. Luffy wants to help Nami defeat Arlong, but he lets her choose. After her help me moment, Luffy asks if she wants to fight against Arlong and she agrees. She wants to finally confront her fears and trauma. Luffy and Nami team up to fight against Arlong and free Kokoyashi village from the tyranny of the Arlong pirates. As in the original timeline, Luffy destroys Nami's former workplace and sends Arlong flying through several floors of Arlong Park. It's important to note that Luffy retains his physical strength in this run because he has trained with Ace for over 10 years. In Loguetown, Jacket Luffy faces off against Smoker. He has no chance against the Logia user. As in the original timeline, Dragon comes to Luffy's aid so that he can escape. In this timeline, Luffy has no problem with the antagonists in the East Blue. However, he fights alongside each of his nakama in this run. This strengthens the bond of the crew and gives each member a special role in the story fights. On the Grand Line things will be a little different. Luffy will be even more reliant on the help of his nakama. Powerful opponents with incredibly strong devil fruits await Luffy on the Grand Line. On Whiskey Peak some Baroque agents are defeated, Vivi is rescued and is to be taken to Alabasta. On Little Garden the fight against 𝚲𝚘𝚙𝚒𝚝 takes place, most of Luffy's friends are captured in a wax figure cabinet. The first idea in this fight would be that Luffy wears the giants, but that doesn't work because Broggy is knocked out by the exploding alcohol and Broggy is trapped in the wax. So only two members of the Straw Hat crew are left, Usopp and Sanji. Since Sanji is out hunting somewhere in the jungle, Usopp is the only option. Usopp has the strength of Luffy and the sharpshooting abilities of Usopp. 𝚲𝚘𝚙𝚒𝚘𝚝's wax is burned and with a few punches the Waxman is knocked out. On Drum Island our heroes meet Warpole and fight him. Luffy wants the reindeer with a blue nose in his crew. Here we need to talk about this very specific question. Can someone wear the jacket fruit user if the person already has a devil fruit? Is that then considered eating two devil fruits? This is currently unclear, however I do not believe that this is the case. The jacket only temporarily borrows and amplifies the abilities of another user. No one permanently gains those abilities. Therefore I believe that someone with a devil fruit can wear the jacket fruit user. If that is true, it makes the fruit even more dangerous. This is where Choffy is born. Warpole is not necessarily the best physical fighter. If Warpole has no chance against Luffy, he certainly has no chance against the fusion of Luffy and Chopper. With the newest crew member, they head to Alabasta. Here they face off against Sir Crocodile. Luffy has the physical capacity to defeat Crocodile. However, he lacks the physical resilience of the Gum Gum fruit as well as the moveset. I could imagine Luffy fighting Crocodile alone in the first battle. In the second battle he fights alongside Vivi, and in the third battle he fights with Nico Robin. This way Luffy has different fighting styles in the 3 different battles. In the first defeat Luffy learns that Crocodile's weakness is water. In the second battle he fights alongside Vivi to attack Crocodile with close range and long range attacks. In the third battle Robin comes to Luffy's aid and the two could copy a Gum Gum attack with Robin's devil fruit abilities. Lubin could produce countless hands that are then wrapped in water to catapult Crocodile out of the Tomb of the Kings, similar to the original timeline. This battle will be difficult for Luffy just like in the original timeline. Robin joins the Straw Hat crew after the adventure in Alabasta and Vivi stays in Alabasta to protect her kingdom. On Jaya there's a brawl with Bellamy. Without using his devil fruit, Luffy defeats Bellamy here with just one attack. The Straw Hat crew then heads to 𝚬𝚽𝚑. With a knock upstream they arrive in the White Sea. There they face off against the self-proclaimed god Eneru. To be honest, this battle against Eneru could be the end of the Straw Hat crew. Luffy has no way to counter him in this fight. There are some approaches that can be used to defeat Eneru, but none of these approaches are guaranteed like in the other runs. At this point in time Luffy does not yet know Haki. Without rubber he's unable to grab Eneru and resist his attacks. Only one character on 𝚬𝚽𝚑 possesses Kairoseki. Viper has Kairoseki mounted on his shooters. That means there is a way to disable Eneru's Logia abilities. However, our heroes must make friends with Viper and the Shandian to get this chance. This is not easy since the Shandians are not necessarily friends of our heroes. However, in the original timeline an alliance was formed between our heroes and Viper during the 𝚬𝚽𝚑 arc. The enemy of my enemy is actually my friend. Part of the 𝚬𝚽𝚑 arc is a battle royale. In the end everyone fights against Eneru. One character was even able to kill Eneru. That character was Viper. Eneru was killed by a react. However, Eneru was then able to reanimate himself, but what would happen if Eneru received 2 or 3 hits from this dial? Could we possibly defeat him then? For this to happen, Viper would have to wear Luffy's jacket. This way the two would have increased resilience. They could certainly withstand 1 or 2 attacks from Eneru. Viper was already able to use the reject dial 3 times without Luffy. In combination with Luffy there should be even more potential. This battle is unfortunately really a wild card. The Straw Hat crew should actually lose here. There is a method to win, but it requires a lot of luck. However, since Luffy has plot armor, he will somehow win against Eneru together with Viper and his crew. Back on the Blue Sea, our heroes are faced with another defeat. Luffy has no chance against Kuzan in this timeline. 1 attack is enough to freeze Luffy. Then they go to Water 7, where Robin and Usopp leave the crew and our heroes are involved in a plot by the world government. In Water 7, Luffy faces Rob Lucci for the first time and he loses. He just manages to to dodge Lucci's finger pistol on his neck. He's only hit on the arm. At Enies Lobby, the rematch between the two takes place. Luffy has come up with a strategy to defeat Lucci. In this timeline, Luffy does not have Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd. Thus, it should be impossible for Luffy to keep up with Lucci. However, Luffy finds another solution. The body of a certain cyborg can give Luffy the necessary resilience in the fight with Lucci. Luffy asks his future crewmate Franky for help. Lunky is then born and fights against Rob Lucci. All of Franky's techniques are amplified by Luffy's strength. The strong hammer is just as strong as Luffy's Gear 3rd fist. Although Lucci is slightly faster, Franky's body provides the necessary protection. Lucci will try to hit Lunky in the back. He succeeds once and Lunky is almost knocked out. But then comes the motivational speech from Usopp and Lunky can muster the strength for final attack and defeat Lucci. In this timeline, someone other than Franky has to unlock Robin's handcuffs and protect her from the Marines. After Enies Lobby, Franky joins the Straw Hat Pirates and they head to Thriller Bark. The fight against Gekko Moria and Oz goes pretty much the same as in the original timeline. The only difference is that Oz can turn into rubber, but instead he thinks he's a jacket the whole time. Jacket Luffy lets Brook wear him on Thriller Bark to help his new friend, and they both get the 100 shadows that Nightmare Luffy has in the original timeline. This should make the fight against Moria and Oz very easy. Brook then joins the Straw Hat Pirates and the crew finally has their musician. The next fight is against Magellan. Before that, the crew is separated and Boa Hancock has to fall in love with Luffy. She takes Luffy to the underwater prison and in Impel Down, Luffy has to face the Poison Man twice. In the first fight, Luffy naturally loses against Magellan. He has no way to protect himself from his poison. Ivankov then heals Luffy and they have a rematch during their escape. But this time Luffy is a former enemy who is now his ally and can wear his jacket. Luffy and Galdino become Luffino, and with Luffy's strength and Galdino's wax fruit, they could even defeat Magellan in this run. Galdino's wax seems to have a resistance to Magellan's poison. Theoretically, a victory is possible, but the goal, however, is to go to Marineford to save Ace. At Marineford, Luffy almost dies several times, similar to the original timeline. However, he is saved by his Nakama several times. Luffy then has to face Sengoku again on the scaffold. This time Galdino has to save the two brothers, first with a wax wall and then by opening Ace's handcuffs. Ace and Luffy then decide to fight together. Ace trusts his brother to save him. Ace wears Luffy as a jacket and then they become Lace. If Luffy now has control over Ace's body, maybe Ace will be saved in this run. Theoretically, this is possible. Luffy, for example, is not provoked by Akainu's words, therefore an escape is possible here. After all, Law is nearby with a polar tank. Law is actually a big supporter of the D-Carriers, therefore he should have no problem saving Luffy and Ace. If Ace is rescued from Marineford, the arc ends differently, but almost identically. Whitebeard dies and Blackbeard gets his devil fruit. Whitebeard actually never intended to leave Marineford alive. If Ace survives, we must ask ourselves whether there will be a time skip. After all, Ace is not dead, and Luffy did not experience such a traumatic event on Marineford as in the original timeline. However, I can imagine that Rayleigh still makes this suggestion to Luffy. After all, Luffy saw how weak he really is on Marineford. I could even imagine that Rayleigh suggests training Luffy and Ace together. After all, he knows since Marineford that Ace is the son of his former captain. He could have known that before already. Roger even told Rayleigh that his child would be the one to find the One Piece next. Now Rayleigh is in a bit of a bind. Who does he believe more, Shanks or Roger? Shanks said there was a boy in the East Blue who spoke the same words as Roger. Roger, on the other hand, said his child would find the One Piece next. Shanks bet on Luffy and Roger bet on his child who was not born yet at that time. I think Rayleigh will bet on both and prepare both of them for the new world. During the time skip, the two learn to handle Haki and use their abilities even more. In the original story, we only know that Ace has Conqueror's Haki, but in the episode of Ace also confirmed that Ace has armament and observation Haki. It would have surprised me if he wasn't capable of that. After all, he was a commander in a Yonko pirate crew. For Luffy, this time skip is a bit like his childhood, only this time Luffy tries to get closer and closer to Ace's power level. Along with Rayleigh, Luffy has another training partner in Ace. Luffy and Ace also try to train more with the devil fruits and get stronger with them. Because Ace is still alive, some plot points in the new world may unfold slightly differently than in the original timeline. The time skip ends after 2 years and our heroes meet again. Luffy says goodbye to Ace and gives him a part of his vivre card. They can meet again in the New World. The first adventures in the New World are quite similar to the original timeline. On Fishman Island, Jinbei wears Luffy as a jacket and Rumbei is born, but he has no problem in fighting Hody Jones. The match against Caesar takes place on 𝚘𝚙𝚒𝚝. Luffy's haki will be enough to defeat Caesar. After all, Caesar is not the physically strongest character, his devil fruit is still dangerous and Luffy must be careful to not lose his consciousness. Caesar is then kidnapped and the SAD is destroyed on 𝚘𝚘𝚏𝚗. The next stop is Dressrosa. This arc will unfold differently than in the original timeline. Since Ace is still alive, the Mera Mera no Mi is not offered as a prize at the Corrida Colosseum. Therefore, Luffy will not participate in the Battle Royale in the Colosseum. It also raises the question of whether Sabo will travel to Dressrosa. In the original timeline, the revolutionaries had business on Dressrosa. However, Sabo traveled there because he wanted to win Ace's Mera Mera no Mi to inherit his brother's will. In this timeline, Sabo does not remember Ace and Luffy. His memories have not returned in this timeline because Ace did not die at Marineford. However, it's nice to know that in this timeline all 3 brothers are healthy and safe. However, there will not be a reunion with Sabo in this timeline, perhaps in the future when the revolutionaries take action and the 3 brothers can meet again. So if Luffy does not go to the Colosseum, he can help Law in his fight against Doflamingo. Law dresses up as Luffy, Law then wears Luffy as a jacket. Law's abilities combined with Luffy's strength and endurance should be enough to defeat Doflamingo. The fight could theoretically take place on Greenbit, where Law and Doflamingo's first match took place, but the fight can also be divided into 2 parts, one on Greenbit and the other on Dressrosa. After Doflamingo and his crew are defeated, the Alliance travels to Zou. In this timeline, the Straw Hat Grand Fleet is not founded because Luffy did not fight in the Corrida Colosseum. The Mera Mera no Mi was no prize there, so a lot of famous pirates did not even come to Dressrosa to participate in the Corrida Colosseum. On Whole Cake Island, Sanji has to be rescued again. Luffy must face the 2 sweet commanders Charlotte Cracker and Charlotte Katakuri on this island. The fight against Cracker should be quite similar to the original timeline, except that Luffy can really fight with Nami this time. Lumi could produce rain and make Cracker's cookies soft and weak. This way the cookies can be eaten and defeated with Lumi's haki. During the fight against Charlotte Katakuri, Luffy and Sanji reconcile. Similar to the Baratie arc, Luffy and Sanji fight together against the antagonist of the arc. Lanji is born again. Unfortunately, in this timeline, some of the symbolism of the fight is lost. There's no mirror match in the mirror world, because Luffy does not have similar abilities to Katakuri. The fight will unfold differently in this timeline than in the original timeline. Lanji will be able to produce fire with the Diable Gemble and melt Katakuri's mochi. In this fight, Lanji will have to learn advanced observation haki. Without this skill, he will surely not be able to beat Katakuri. However, with Sanji's fire abilities and Luffy's genius in battle, it should be possible to defeat Katakuri. In this timeline, Pudding will have to bake the new wedding cake for Big Mom almost alone, since Sanji is busy fighting. Then our heroes head to Wano Kuni. The fight against Kaido will be extremely exciting in this timeline. Ace survived Marineford, and together with Marco and Izo, he travels to Wano to help his brother and Yamato. This means that in the rooftop piece, not only the supernovas of this generation, but also a supernova of the previous generation will be present. The first fights against Kaido will go similarly. The fight will be pretty intense. Luffy will fuse once with Zoro, once with Law, and once with Ace to deal some serious damage to Kaido. Luffy and Ace will learn their advanced Conqueror's haki in this fight, which allows them to damage Kaido. Kid will act a little like Vegeta in Dragon Ball. Just imagine the moment with the Potara earrings. Instead of earrings, Kid just doesn't want to wear Luffy's jacket. Sorry guys, but we won't see this transformation in this run. As in the original timeline, there will be a one-on-one fight between Luffy and Kaido, but spoilers, Luffy loses this fight and flies off for Nigashima again, needing to be rescued by the Hard Pirates. The adult Momo and Luffy then set off again to defeat Kaido once and for all. In the meantime, Yamato and Ace continue their fight against Kaido together. Once they reach the top, Luffy, Yamato and Ace give Kaido their signature attacks. Then Luffy wants Momo to wear him like a jacket so that he can experience what it's like to have Kaido's devil fruit powers. This leads to a match between Luffy Nozuke and Kaido. They are actually evenly matched. This is the mirror match from the original timeline where Luffy and Katakuri have similar abilities. This time it's actually a mirror match between 2 dragons. However, this form cannot last long because Momo's task is to save Onigashima from falling on the capital. In this final scenery, Luffy will not necessarily fight Kaido alone, but with the help of Ace. The two brothers will face the world's strongest creature together. With their jacket fusion, the two brothers are able to do well against the weakened Kaido. Now we have to ask ourselves a crucial question. Will Luffy trigger the awakening of the jacket fruit, and what could the awakening of this fruit be? The awakening of paramecia fruits allows the user to transform living beings as well as inanimate objects into the respective elements or substance. Could Luffy use the awakening to transform other characters into jackets and then wear them? Could these characters then control Luffy's body? Does the awakening of this fruit allow a kind of reverse effect? That would certainly be very exciting. Unfortunately, this is quite useless in this fight against Kaido, so I don't believe Luffy necessarily needs to trigger his awakening in this fight. Ace, on the other hand, could trigger his awakening in this fight, which would give their fusion Lace awakened fire abilities. I believe an all-out fight between Lace and Kaido with the awakening of the Mera Mera no Mi is enough to win the fight against the world's strongest creature. Meanwhile, Momonosuke created flame clouds to prevent Onigashima from falling on the capital, and everything is safe. The jacket fruit is actually a fairly weak devil fruit in One Piece. It can't do anything on its own, you need the help of others to fully utilize the potential of this devil fruit. For Luffy and his nakama, it's actually the perfect devil fruit. The good thing about this storyline is that Ace could still be alive and together with Luffy defeat a Yonko. This would somehow fulfill Luffy's and Ace's promise to meet again at the Pirate Summit. This metaphorical summit would then be reached through their victory against Kaido. I ranked the jacket fruit for Luffy in the A tier. The Operation Fruit is the ultimate fruit in One Piece. It combines several abilities in one fruit. So what would happen if Luffy gets the Operation Fruit? The answer is quite simple. It would have changed the entire second half of the story. Instead of Rocinante, Shanks steals the Operation Fruit 16 years ago from the hands of the Asperods. According to Shanks, this ultimate devil fruit may not fall into the hands of the Flamingo or the world government. Rocinante will come up empty-handed and Law will die from his embolied sickness. What will happen if Luffy and Law don't form an alliance in the New World? Let's find out. The story begins as always in Fuchsia Village. Luffy wants to become a pirate, Shanks doesn't let him. Higuma comes into the bar and causes trouble. During this, Luffy snacks the Operation Fruit. After the mountain bandits have left, Shanks realizes that the devil fruit is missing from the treasure chest. Luffy is shocked that he can never swim again, and out of frustration he activates his room for the first time. Since Shanks' Haki is actually too strong, Luffy's room shouldn't affect him. In the following days, Luffy learns what devil fruit he has eaten. He can operate within the room he creates. For Luffy, this is a rather boring devil fruit because he's not a doctor. However, as the story progresses, Luffy will learn to use his devil fruit in a different way than Trafalgar Law did. The story then develops quite similarly. Luffy gets kidnapped by Higuma, Shanks saves him but loses an arm in the fight with the Lords of the Coast. Luffy receives Destroyed and swears to become the Pirate King. Afterwards, Garps brings Luffy to Dardan. There Luffy meets Ace and Sabo. The three become brothers and vow to have their own adventures. Then Sabo is seemingly killed, Ace starts his journey, and 3 years later Luffy also begins his journey. In the last 10 years Luffy has mastered his devil fruit for close combat. Luffy doesn't cut his opponents with his sword, but with his fists. When someone is hit by Luffy's punches in the room, the person breaks apart into several pieces. Similar to what happens with Buggy and his Chop Chop fruit. In the East Blue, Luffy has no problem against Alvida, Morgan, Captain Black or Don Creek. Due to the variety of abilities he gains from the Operation Fruit, Luffy doesn't have any major difficulties. He can, for example, easily free Zoro with a Shamble. Only Buggy and Arlong could be a problem. Buggy is immune to Luffy's devil fruit powers. However, since Buggy is not necessarily the strongest pirate in East Blue, Luffy's physical ability should still be sufficient. The problem with Arlong lies in his fishman abilities. Arlong can manipulate water, and with Arlong Park he has a home advantage. On the other hand, Luffy focuses on close combat with his devil fruit. Perhaps Luffy will learn the attack Counter Shock during the fight against Arlong. With this, he could definitely defeat Arlong with an electric attack. In Loguetown, Luffy faces Smoker. The fight against Smoker could certainly be interesting. Depending on how well Luffy can control his devil fruit, Luffy could remove Smoker's heart with Mess and thus escape the situation in Loguetown. With the room ability, Luffy could be able to cut Smoker, but since Smoker is a Logia user, he can easily connect his limbs to his body again. Without Haki, Smoker will not be harmed here unless Luffy is able to remove his heart. But I don't think that Luffy can use this ability so early on in the story. Even Law only showed this abilities after the time skip. So Luffy needs the help of Dragon again to escape from the Marine Captain. On the Grand Line, the plot develops quite similar to the original timeline. Luffy has a brief fight with Laboom, he promises that they will meet again in the future. Then they go to Whiskey Peak, where Zoro slices up some bounty hunters, Miss Wednesday reveals herself as Princess Vivi from Alabasta. Now she and the kingdom needs to be safe, and Igaram goes up in flames. Robin gets shown for the first time, and then our heroes head off on the grand adventure to Little Garden. In Little Garden they encounter the Wax Figure Cabinet. Even Galdino stands no chance against the Operation Fruit. During his fights in the East Blue, Luffy developed a new tactic. While he and his opponents fight in a room, Luffy constantly shambles back and forth. This allows him to copy the Zoro technique within the room, even though he doesn't possess that ability. With this speed boost, Galdino has no chance against Luffy. He doesn't have any time to build his wax walls and dodge Luffy's shattering punches. Our heroes are saved, and then they head to Drum Island to treat Nami's illness. Even Warple stands no chance against our heroes. Luffy simply smashes the Tin Man into countless pieces. Just imagine Warple becoming a mini buggy. Luffy removes his main body parts, so Warple only has his legs, small arms and giant mouth to get around. This could be a way for Luffy to defeat his opponents and somehow punish them. In Alabasta there are 3 battles with Sir Crocodile. First Luffy gets defeated, but learns that he can touch Crocodile with water. Then we see a second evenly matched fight, and finally the victory in the Tomb of the Kings. Let's not forget that while Luffy doesn't have his Gum abilities, he still has the same will and creativity in battle. Thanks to the Room Zoro attack, Luffy can fight at a speed that Crocodile can't keep up with. As a result, Luffy indirectly developed a type of Gear 2 version of his ability very early on. This would give him some leverage over the Shishibukai. Alabasta is safe, Vivi stays in her kingdom, and our heroes departure with a gesture of friendship. And Robin joins the crew. Then our heroes travel to Jaya and then to Skypiea. The fight with Eneru could turn out to be very tricky, as it does in every run. However, the Ope Ope no Mi has a very powerful ability that is seen more as a joke. Doflamingo wanted to use the personality switch of the Operation Fruit and the Treasure of Marijoa to gain world domination. If Imu is the Treasure of Marijoa, then Doflamingo may have wanted to achieve world domination by swapping personalities with Imu. In the scenery, however, Luffy has a much funnier idea. He probably can't defeat Eneru in a fight, but he can simply transfer Eneru's personality into that of an animal. However, this ability probably doesn't work on characters with strong armament haki. Since Eneru doesn't possess this ability, it should be possible. That means in this timeline, Eneru swaps his personality with a South Bird. With Luffy and his Room Zoro, it should certainly be possible to dodge Eneru's attack and switch his personality. This would make the Sky Island safe again. Then our heroes travel to Water 7 and Ines Lobby. Robin's past catches up with her, the Cypher Pole is after her, and Frankie. On Ines Lobby, there's a showdown between the Straw Hat Pirates and CP9. Luffy confronts Rob Lucci and his Zoan Devil Fruit. This fight can turn out to be a big problem, because Lucci is incredibly fast and strong. Although Luffy can keep up with Lucci's speed with his Room Zoro, he still takes enormous damage from his attacks. Luffy also has to use his defensive ability Curtain in this fight. However, after several hits, Luffy manages to separate Lucci's 2 arms, rendering him helpless. With a counter shock attack, he finishes Rob Lucci. After escaping from Ines Lobby and recovering in Water 7, together with Frankie, the Straw Hats head to the Florian Triangle. Brook temporarily joins the crew, and our heroes have to face Gekko Moria and Oz. Even in this timeline, Luffy could receive 100 shadows from Lola, making the fight against Moria and Oz no problem. Even without his shadows, I believe Luffy could easily win with the help of his Devil Fruit. He just has to slice Moria and Oz with a few attacks. Then it's off to Sabaody, where our heroes meet the Supernovas and Rayleigh. However, one Supernova and his crew are missing, namely Trafalgar Law and the Hard Pirates. Due to the death of Law and Rocinante, the crew never came together, so there are only 10 Supernovas gathered on Sabaody. Luffy punches St. Charles again, this attracts Kizaru to the island, and then Kuma separates the crew. Even this time Luffy can't really do much. Even if Luffy keeps shambling his Nakama back and forth, Kuma will eventually catch up to them and then scatter them. Luffy lands on Amazon Lily, captivates Hancock, and then they head to Impel Down to save Ace. Impel Down with the Ope Ope no Mi makes everything easier. Sure, you have to watch out for Magellan, but theoretically Luffy can create a room to shuffle himself from level to level. So it shouldn't be a problem for Luffy to reach Ace in time. I can even imagine Luffy reaching Ace early on in this timeline. He just has to teleport further down. It would be awesome if Luffy succeeds in rescuing Ace from his execution in Marineford in this timeline. Luffy could also free all the other prisoners to cause chaos. Furthermore, Blackbeard and his crew also break into Impel Down, causing even more chaos. so theoretically it is possible to save Ace here, especially considering how Luffy's mastery of his Devil Fruit should be at this point. The escape from Impel Down would be similar to the original timeline, just with Ace joining in. Unfortunately, Ace wouldn't be able to use his Devil Fruit abilities. During the escape, Ace could surely find the 𝙲𝚘𝚙𝚒𝚘𝚡 to contact the Whitebeard pirates, who are already prepared to free Ace in Marineford. What if they now make their way to Impel Down to directly rescue Ace? This could also lead to a reunion between Luffy, Ace and Blackbeard. Ace could be full of anger towards Blackbeard, but at the same time he wouldn't be able to do anything against him with the Sea Stone handcuffs. It's not quite clear if Luffy could just remove Ace's arms so that the Sea Stone handcuffs fall off, because we don't know how the room works when Sea Stone handcuffs are in the way. So they would have to let Blackbeard go. But before our heroes could escape, they are confronted by Magellan. The fight against Magellan shouldn't be a problem with the help of 𝙬𝚘𝚙𝚎 and Luffy's Operation Fruit, as well as the assistance of Crocodile and Jinbei. However, Luffy doesn't gain any poison resistance from Magellan, which could be a problem against Caesar. By the way, Ivankov and the Okama also joined the escape after seeing the chaos in Impel Down. Outside of Impel Down, Marcus suddenly appears. The Whitebeard pirates are ready to save them all, but they need to hurry. The Marines have already heard about this prison break. Jinbei summons the whale sharks again, and together with Marco as the navigator, they surf on a wooden door towards the Moby Dick. The Gate of Justice needs to be opened again. Once again, Mr. 2 sacrifices himself for our heroes. Luffy promises him that he will return one day to save him. Just like Ash fulfilled his dream with his Pidgeot, Luffy will also fulfill this promise in this timeline. Hopefully the reunion won't take 20 years. Luffy made it. He was able to save his brother. Whitebeard is glad that his son is still alive. On the Moby Dick, Luffy then gets to know Whitebeard. The Emperor thanks the Supernova for his help. However, Luffy immediately says that he didn't do it for Whitebeard but for his brother. Luffy even teases Whitebeard, saying that in old Giza he took his sweet time to save Ace. But Whitebeard can only laugh heartily at this joke. This young rookie reminds him of a pirate he once knew. Sir Crocodile then tries to disrupt the harmony by flying towards Whitebeard to kill him. But the attack fails. Marco jumps in between and stops Crocodile. Juzo joins in and they put Sea Stone handcuffs on Crocodile. In the meantime, Whitebeard destroys the Sea Stone handcuffs on Ace. 𝚬𝚘𝚙𝚎 could also have removed Ace's handcuffs at the end of Impel Down. Luffy then asks Whitebeard if he can take him back to Sabaody so that he can meet up with his crew again. They were supposed to meet again after 3 days to set sail for the New World. Whitebeard wants to do Luffy the favor. The problem that arises now is that Luffy can't just gather his crew again to set sail to the New World. He hasn't experienced the death of Ace at Marineford like in the original timeline. Without this war, Luffy lacks the perspective that he's still too weak for the New World, but in this timeline things turned out differently thanks to Rayleigh. On the Moby Dick there's a 𝚬𝚬𝚙𝚎 call between Luffy and Rayleigh. Let's not forget that Rayleigh and the Roger Pirates were too early on Laugh Tale, probably because the ancient weapons weren't ready yet. We also now know that if Luffy now travels to the New World, Momo and Kinemon will still travel to the future, and they are very necessarily for the dawn of the world and for the plot on Wano Kuni. Rayleigh of course knows why they were all too early. Through the rescue of Ace and also the sacrifice of Shanks, Rayleigh has started to believe more in Luffy. He also wants to help him become the Pirate King, but with his current strength he won't succeed. Rayleigh suggests waiting for 2 years so that Luffy can become stronger. He needs to learn Haki. Without these abilities he has no chance in the New World. Two scenarios could now arise. Luffy trains for 2 years with Rayleigh, or Ace and Whitebeard also get involved into the training. I would find it quite interesting if Whitebeard also trained Ace during the time skip. Whitebeard believes in Ace as the future Pirate King, and Rayleigh believes in Luffy. After 2 years we would have two brothers who are both rivals on the way to the Pirate Summit, just as they promised each other in Alabasta. During these 2 years both Luffy and Ace have mastered their Devil Fruit abilities and have become physically much stronger. The adventure in the New World unfolds slightly differently this time. Everything on Fishman Island almost goes as usual. Hody Jones and his crew are defeated. The interesting part is that Luffy doesn't start any conflict with Big Mom because Fishman Island is still under the protection of Whitebeard. Jinbei then joins destroyed pirates on Fishman Island. This makes many future adventures much easier. By the way, instead of Law, Basil Hawkins has become a Shichibukai just as Oda originally planned. The Yonko and the Admirals stay unchanged, because Marineford never happened. On Punk Hazard, our heroes meet Kinemon. They want to save the samurai in Momonosuke. For that, Luffy has to confront Caesar, but this time Law doesn't show up and therefore neither does Vergo. Destroyed pirates don't form an alliance with the hard pirates. As a result, they don't come up with a plan. During the time skip, Rayleigh asks Luffy to learn the basics of using a sword, to have more ranged abilities with his devil fruit. Reluctantly, Luffy accepted it. Now Luffy can use certain long-range attacks with his sword. This makes it much easier to defeat Caesar. Kinemon and Momo are saved. Then they go to Dressrosa to save Kanjuro. Since our heroes don't seek any conflicts on the island, they manage to rescue Kanjuro without any problems. But then Doflamingo recognizes Luffy's devil fruit and realizes who the Operation Fruit belonged to in the past. They start fighting, but Doflamingo, even with his awakening, doesn't stand a chance against Luffy and his ultimate devil fruit. Luffy defeats Doflamingo with a gamma knife. Then they search for Raizo. Kinemon has a vivre card from Inuarashi and Nekomamushi. This leads our heroes to Zou. Since the crew didn't split up in this timeline, Capone and Sanji never meet. Destroyed pirates arrive at Zou together, just in time to help the Minks against Jack. Luffy could start his conflict against Kaido by defeating Jack in an all-out battle. This would be a declaration of war against Kaido. The Minks are healed, Raizo is safe, Luffy learns about the road poneglyphs and Kaido's actions on Wano. He also hears some stories about Oden, Roger and Whitebeard. Our heroes then travel to Wano Kuni to confront Kaido. Since the events of Whole Cake Island haven't happened yet, there's no alliance between Kaido and Big Mom. Luffy then tells Kinemon about Izu, whom he met on Whitebeard's ship. Kinemon also wants to ask the Whitebeard pirates for assistance in the fight against Kaido, as Oden was once a member of this crew. Then it comes to a reunion with the Whitebeard pirates. Whitebeard is happy to see the samurai again. He apologizes for not coming to their aid 20 years ago, as he did not want to interfere in the country's conflicts. However, through Luffy's rescue mission, he realizes the importance of getting involved in certain conflicts to help his nakama. On the day of the Fire Festival, the legendary raid on Onigashima begins. This time not only the Straw Hat crew, the Kid Pirates and the Wano Samurai fight against Kaido and his crew, but also the Whitebeard Pirates. Ace takes on a role similar to Law in the battle in this timeline. Chaos quickly ensues on Onigashima. The Beast Pirates are outnumbered by Whitebeard and his commanders. Whitebeard, however, chooses not to interfere in the fight against his former crewmate, leaving the battle to a new generation, as Marco said in the original timeline. The fight against Kaido takes place on the roof. Luffy, Ace, Kid, Zoro and Killer confront the Yonko. He takes a lot of damage but manages to take them out one by one. Meanwhile, Marco fights against King and Jozu fights against Queen. The Tobiropo are defeated by the Straw Hat crew once again. This time Nami and Usopp get to face Ulti and Page 1 without Big Mom coming to their aid. When our heroes realize they have no chance against Kaido, Whitebeard finally steps in to stall him until the younger generation can fight again. Luffy is not allowed to fall from Onigashima in this timeline. The hard pirates cannot rescue him from the water. Whitebeard holds off Kaido while Luffy, Ace and Kid get back on their feet. The three of them prepare to attack Kaido again. Luffy somehow triggers the awakening of his devil fruit abilities. Kid already has this ability apparently. We know that Law has his awakening during Wano. He likely awakened it somehow during his fight with the Flamingo. Luffy's awakening may have been triggered by his defeat. Unfortunately, we still don't know how awakenings are triggered in One Piece. It could be when a devil fruit is used for the same thing as the wish for which it was created. Luffy envelops his hand with his K-Room ability, similar to how Bartolomeo enveloped his hand with his barrier. With a K-Room, the enveloped object can change in size. Luffy's fist becomes a massive Gear 3 fist and hits Kaido. Kid also uses Damn Punk to catapult Kaido off the island. However, similar to Big Mom, it is not enough to defeat him. Ace is the only one who has not yet triggered the awakening of his fruit. He uses Entei to shoot Kaido further into the abyss. But even that is not enough against the Yonko. Kaido then activates his Fire Dragon form to finally defeat the Supernovas. Meanwhile, King, Queen and the Tobiropo are defeated. Only Kaido remains standing in his crew. Whitebeard jumps into the air to strike Kaido's Fire Dragon form with a massive earthquake. Whitebeard is hit by a massive flame and his face is once again half burned. However, the attack is effective. Both Kaido and Whitebeard fall from the sky. Momo flies into the air and catches Whitebeard. Kaido, on the other hand, crashes back onto the roof of Onigashima. Every remaining character on Onigashima attacks Kaido with a final signature attack. Then suddenly the invincible Yonko falls and is defeated. The reign of Orochi and Kaido and the Beast Pirates is over. Our heroes host a second festival to celebrate the freedom of Wano. Whitebeard survives, and Ace and Luffy continue their rivalry over the poneglyphs. Luffy now possesses 2 of the 4 road poneglyphs. With the full strength of his crew and his awakening, he will certainly easily steal Big Mom's poneglyph. So we might see the plot with Sanji's wedding again, but in this timeline the whole crew would come to Whole Cake Island. Then only the 4th and final road poneglyph is missing. The man marked by flames is still a mystery. He could be a member of the Rock's pirates. Somehow our heroes will get a hold of this poneglyph. With this poneglyph, the Straw Hat crew can go to Laugh Tale and Luffy can become the Pirate King. All in all, the Operation Fruit is very overpowered, as the name suggests. Luffy has no problem against most antagonists, he could even save Ace from Impel Down, and it would be the first timeline where Ace and Whitebeard survive. Therefore I categorized the Operation Fruit in the S tier. Which Devil Fruit should Luffy use in his next adventure? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, why not watch this video next?